All right, this is a continuation of chapter 1. Next, Mother, so they're all sharing their feelings at dinner. Next, Mother, who held a prominent position at the Department of Justice, talked about her feelings. Today, a repeat offender had been brought before her, someone who had broken the rules before, someone who she hoped had been adequately and fairly punished, and who had been restored to his place, to his job, his home, his family unit. To see him brought before her a second time caused her overwhelming feelings of frustration and anger, and even guilt that she hadn't made a difference in his life. I feel frightened, too, for him, she confessed. You know that there's no third chance. The rules say that if there's a third transgression, he simply has to be released. Jonas shivered. He knew it happened. There was even a boy in his group of 11s whose father had been released years before. No one ever mentioned it. The disgrace was unspeakable. There was a stigma to it.
Yo!
It was hard to imagine. Lily stood up and went to her mother. She stroked her mother's arm. From his place at the table, Father reached over and took her hand. Jonas reached for the other. One by one, they comforted her. Soon she smiled, thanked them, and murmured that she felt soothed. The ritual continued. Jonas, Father asked, "You're last tonight." Jonas sighed. This evening, he almost would have preferred to keep his feelings hidden. This evening, he almost would have preferred to keep his feelings hidden, but it was, of course, against the rules. I'm feeling apprehensive, he confessed, glad that the appropriate descriptive word had finally come to him. Why is that, son? His father looked concerned. I know there's really nothing to worry about, Jonas explained, and that every adult has been through it. I know you have, Father, and you too, Mother, but it's a ceremony I'm apprehensive about. It's almost December. Lily looked up, her eyes wide. The ceremony of 12, she whispered in an odd voice. Even the smallest children, Lily's age and younger, knew that it lay in the future for each of them. I'm glad you told us your feelings, Father said. Lily, Mother said, beckoning to the little girl. Go on now and get into your night clothes. Father and I are going to stay here and talk to Jonas for a while. Lily sighed, but obediently she got down from her chair. Privately, she asked. Mother nodded. Yes, she said. This talk will be private with Jonas. Chapter 2. Jonas watched as his father poured a fresh cup of coffee. He waited. You know, his father finally said, every December was excited for me when I was young, and it has been for you and Lily too, I'm sure. Each December brings such changes. Jonas nodded. He could remember the December back when he had become, well, probably a 4. The earlier ones were lost to him, but he observed them each year, and he remembered Lily's earliest Decembers. He remembered when the family received Lily, the day she was named, the day she had become a... The ceremony for the ones was always noisy and fun. Each December, all the new children born in the previous year turned 1. One at a time, there were always 50 in each year's group. If none had been released, they had been brought to the stage by nurturers who had cared for them since birth. Some were already walking, wobbly on their unsteady legs. Others were no more than a few days old, wrapped in blankets, held by their nurturers. I enjoy the naming, Jonas said. His mother agreed, smiling. The year we got Lily, we knew, of course, that we'd receive our female because we'd made our application and had been approved. But we'd been wondering what her name would be. I could have sneaked a look at the list prior to the ceremony, Father confided. The committee always makes the list in advance, and it's right there in the office at the nurturing center. As a matter of fact, he went on, I feel a little guilty about this, but I did go in this afternoon and look to see if this year's naming list had been made yet. It was right there in the office, and I looked up number 36. That's the little guy I've been concerned about, because it occurred to me that it might enhance his nurturing if I could call him by a name, just privately, of course, when no one else is around. Did you find it? Jonas asked. He was fascinated. It didn't seem a terribly important rule, but the fact that his father had broken a rule at all awed him. He glanced at his mother, the one responsible for adherence to the rules, who was relieved to see that she was smiling. His father nodded. His name, if he makes it to the naming without being released, of course, is Gabriel. So I whisper that to him when I feed him every 4 hours and during exercise and playtime. If no one can hear me. I call him Gabe, actually, he said and grinned. Gabe, Jonas thought it out. A good name, he decided. Though Jonas had only become a 5 the year that they acquired Lily and learned her name, he remembered the excitement, the conversations at home, wondering about her, how she would look, who she would be, how she would fit into their established family unit. He remembered climbing the steps to the stage with his parents, his father by his side that year instead of the nurturers, since it was the year that he would be given a new child of his own. He remembered his mother taking the new child, his sister, into his arms. While the document was read to the assembled family units, new child 23, the namer had read, Lily. So namer is a job. He remembered his father's look of delight and that his father had whispered, "She's one of my favorites. I was hoping for her to be the one." The crowd had clapped and Jonas had grinned. He liked his sister's name. Lily, barely awake, had waved her small fist. Then they had stepped down to make room for the next family unit. "When I was an 11, his father said now, as you are, Jonas, I was very impatient waiting for the ceremony of 12. It's a long 2 days. I remember that I enjoyed the ones, as I always do, but that I didn't pay much attention to the other ceremonies, except for my sister's. She became a 9 that year and got her bicycle. I'd been teaching her to ride mine, even though technically I wasn't supposed to." Jonas laughed. It was one of the few rules that was not taken very seriously and was almost always broken. The children all received their bicycles at 9, and they were not allowed to ride bicycles before then, but almost always the older brothers and sisters had secretly taught the younger ones. Jonas had been thinking already of teaching Lily. There was a talk about changing the rule and giving the bicycles at an earlier age. A committee was studying the idea. When something went to the committee for study, the people always joked about it. They said that the committee members would become elders by the time the rule change was made. Rules were very hard to change. Sometimes, if it was a very important rule, unlike the one governing the age for bicycles, it would have to go eventually to the receiver for a decision. The receiver was the most important elder. Jonas had never even seen him that he knew of. Someone in a position of such importance lived and worked alone. But the committee would never bother the receiver with a question about bicycles. They would simply fret and argue about it themselves for years until the citizens forgot that they had ever gone to them for study. Her father continued. "So I watched and cheered when my sister Katya became a 9 and removed her hair ribbons and got her bicycle." Father went on. "Then I didn't pay much attention to the 10s and 11s. And finally, at the end of the second day, which seemed to go on forever, it was my turn. It was the ceremony of 12. Jonas shivered. He pictured his father, who must have been a shy and quiet boy, for he was a shy and quiet man seated with his group, waiting to be called to the stage. The ceremony of 12 was the last of the ceremonies, the most important. I remember how proud my parents looked, and my sister too, even though she wanted to be out riding the bicycle publicly. She stopped fidgeting and was very still and attentive when my turn came. But to be honest, Jonas, his father said, for me, there was not the element of suspense that there is with your ceremony, because I was already fairly certain of what my assignment was going to be. Jonas was surprised. There is no way really to know in advance. It was a secret selection made by the leaders of the community, the committee of elders, who took the responsibility so seriously that there were never even any jokes made about assignments. His mother seemed surprised too. "How could you have known?" she asked. His father smiled his gentle smile. Well, it was clear to me, and my parents later confessed, that it had been obvious to them too, what my aptitude was. I had always loved the new children more than anything. When my friends in my age group were holding bicycle races or building toy vehicles or bridges with their construction sets or all the things I do with my friends, Jonas pointed out, and his mother nodded in agreement. I always participated, of course, because as children we must experience all of those things, and I studied hard in school as you do, Jonas, but again and again during free time I found myself drawn to the new children. I spent almost all of my volunteer hours helping in the nurturing center. Of course, the elders knew that from their observations.